Hello and welcome to Ulga's Tavern. On today's video is going to be part 2 of the timeline that I was doing, so I'll be continuing where I left off. And that was where Lord Van Breck was killed by Lord Nilat in order to zap back to his ear and warn Sigmar of the current threat rising in the Eight Peaks. But as he was the only one to survive, as we know of, the rest of the forces of Lord Nilat had to find somehow a way to retreat safely with the forces that they had back to the Genesis Gate in order to be able to survive and be able to be reforged, since they have to retreat from the entire forces of chaos, plus staying away from the cursed shrines that the Eater of Tomes have created. And in the last ditch attempt, they managed to retreat. They lost many Stormcast Eternals along the way, and once they retreated successfully, they have assumed that they have lost at least 2/3 of the forces that once invaded the Eight Peaks. Back at the Genesis Gate, the Hollow Knights were struggling to keep the gate open on the ground side of the gate. Led by Garda Steelsoul, was being constantly attacked by and plagued by the forces of Nurgle. These forces were spearheaded by the Blessed Sons and later followed by many more forces, including the Beastmen. Even though losing many by the barrage of arrows of Stormcast, they moved forward. Soon the battle ensued and the Stormcast began to lose hope and knew that they would die, but were going to try to hold the gate as much as they could. But soon an army of the fabled Seraphon began to appear and materialized in the foot of the Genesis Gate and began to kill warriors and chaos warriors. But suddenly, as soon as they materialized, they began to move forward as well and ignore the battle that was ensuing between the forces of Nurgle and the Stormcast Eternal, and they went into the Genesis Gate, abandoning their fellow allies to die. The hope that the Hollow Knights had in the beginning when they first saw the Seraphon appear was beginning to diminish, and now they welcomed death. After 3 days of battling the forces of Nurgle, their numbers swelled and overwhelmed the Stormcast, and Lord Guardius fell in battle. The Stormcast kept fighting despite the fall of their fellow leader. Once Lord Nilat reached the gate, sadly they would also meet their doom. But at least they survived long enough to be reforged. At the end of this battle, they were finally reached by the Sylvaneth, but once they reached the battle, it became not a battlefield but a death field. It's surrounded by thousands and thousands of bodies. Only 4 of the Hollow Knight warriors remained. At the end of this battle, when Lord Nilat was reforged, he swore an oath he would repay the debt of such bravery shown by the Hollow Knights to have hold the gate long enough for them to have reached it and given them time to be reforged. Once the Seraphon crossed the gate, the chaos-infected Eight Peaks recoiled in horror that the Seraphon, who were so naturally attuned to the natural order of the cosmics, were marching in the Eight Peaks. So all sorts of chaos fiends attacked the Seraphon, and every loss that the Seraphon suffered was great because the Slan Kotek could not just summon more warriors on this chaos-infested lands, but despite all of that, they marched forth. The Eater of Tomes was too focused on destroying the retreating forces of the Stormcast that he did not notice the threat of the Seraphon army that marched forward to the Vale of Screams. To destroy the Silver Tower, the Seraphon also used spells to cut off the Eater of Tomes' vast network of towers and spying devices in order to hide their true intentions, and so the Eater of Tomes was ignorant to the threat. Soon the Seraphon reached the Silver Tower and began to attack, and a great battle ensued, with Ripperdactyls playing a huge role, flying and killing a bunch of the Tzeentch demons. But soon the Great Slan used a magical spell to make the rest of the Saurus warriors and skinks being able to fly and join the battle, and now it was a full-scale aerial battle. The Eater of Tomes returned to his domain and brought reinforcements and thought the Seraphon could maybe breach the walls of the Silver Tower, but could not destroy the tower itself. But he felt uneasy in the same way about the sudden Seraphon attack. Now it became a battle of magical might between the Eater of Tomes and the Great Salon priest. Sensing the threat, the Eater of Tomes decided it was time to retreat, and he used the spell taught to him by the Great Singe himself, and it made the Silver Tower come out of the earth and show its true size, and beginning to float like a giant spaceship. And this makes debris fall from the sky, killing thousands of Chaos and Sora's warriors. In the wake of this catastrophe, the Great Salon used a protection spell to help as many of his warriors survive the sudden debris of rocks falling upon them. Such catastrophe that sadly it was expected, so he did not bite an eyelash as to the losses of Sora's warriors that he had suffered in such catastrophe. The tower flew away, but that was part of the great plan that the Great Croak had foreseen. The Silver Tower escaped to the Great Void, but was soon met by the giant spaceships of the Seraphon, which was used to escape the world that was, and began to have a ship-to-ship battle in the Void, and the magical weapons of the Seraphon were focusing their entire attacks in one section only. The Eater of Tomes sensed the danger of the situation and did an emergency exit out of the Void, which sent him crashing into the realm of Shaman. Barely surviving the attack, he went outside and assessed the damage of his now battered tower and realized the focus fire of the Seraphon was aimed to expose a specific section of the tower, and he witnessed in horror the danger of the situation and began to try to repair the damage of his magic with his magic, but was soon stopped by the sound of roaring of a new threat in Shaman, the Thunder Lizards. Under the advice of Lord Croak himself, he had previously sent them to Shaman to continue to finish the great plan, and were now on the verge to clash with the battered tower. With its magic, the Eater of Tomes summoned more demons to fight and defend the tower, but the Thunder Lizard proved too much, and the Star Warden skink Ikuto aimed his Bastiladons to the open section, and in a huge flash the tower exploded, and those in distant lands who had the misfortune to be gazing in the right direction were blinded by the intense flares of light. The shockwave caused the tower's demise. Struck with the force of the god's fist, it shattered the nearest mountains and launched their splintered peaks into the stratosphere. Lakes were turned to boil mist in an instant. Continental plates were shunted like slip tiles, and the free city of Tensis was swallowed by the tsunami of liquid metal. Its 50,000 inhabitants wiped out in a single second. Horrific moments, disintegrating anything in a 1,000-mile radius. The tower was no more. The sudden explosion of the tower created a chain reaction and destroyed any realm gate that was connected to the Silver Tower to be destroyed as well. From far away, the Endrig Master Drongon Humbleson watched the blast and how it turned the sky into the color of burning aether gold, and we meet here the mysterious Grumpy, an Arcanaut, who suggests they should go and investigate what was the sudden blast. Now we go back to find out what Morathi has been up to, and she long has been preparing her ritual to become a goddess, and everything is going according to plan. They have all the ingredients they need, and they have control of all the strategic regions across the realm of Ulgu, and had hired Scourge privateers to help her defend the city in case of attacks, and so the ritual could not be interrupted. But what they did not expect was the sudden retaliation of the Ideneth Deepkin, who were angered at the fact that the Ocarina Lantern was taken away by Morathi. We meet High King Voltros, the last of the Sithai, the original elven people that Teclis created but deemed too traumatized, so wanted to exterminate them. Many of the Knight Ideneth respected him and revered him, and so when he called upon all of them and unified them to do a unified invasion of Hagnar to get back what's stolen from them, they all obeyed and launched their attack. They surrounded the city, but the Scourge privateers were ready and had set up their defenses. As Morathi continued with her ritual, the sky began to crackle with red lightning and the sounds of chanting of the ritual. Many of the privateers started becoming nervous about what was going to occur, and soon 12 Leviathans bursted from the water, and many of the Idaneth forces leaping forward to battle. The battle to defend Hagnar had begun. The Scorched privateers, even though seeing many creatures and giant monsters, did not falter, and the battle ensued, with the privateers holding steady and the line holding. In other parts of the city, more Idaneth attacked, but many Canaanite forces were ready to meet the enemy, and soon the whole city was consumed by bloodshed, with the forces of Morathi controlling the situation and the Idaneth seemingly losing the battle, which is when High King Volturnas decided to join the battle and gave the Idaneth a second wind to fight. The Idaneth began to turn the tide, but from far away the Slaanesh forces who have been following Morathi around because they have seen the prophecy of Slaanesh's return and believe Morathi is the key, and when they see the Idaneth are starting to turn the battle, they join the fight, but not to attack both sides, but to help the Scourged privateers and the Canaanite defeat the Idaneth. The Scourged privateers and the Canaanites don't know what to make sense of what they're seeing because their sworn enemy is suddenly joining forces with them. The battle became a battle of attrition, but to King Volturnas there was only one goal, and that was to get the lantern back. So he took his most elite warriors and spearheaded an attack without the main army to get what they came for. While the battle raged on and Morathi was preparing to enact her end plan to become a goddess, all of the champions of chaos she had been capturing were sacrificed and the blood put into the cauldron, which soon made a mystical connection to Slaanesh, and he was happy to finally have food, but soon found the taste sour and realized he was not tasting elf souls but chaos souls, and that seeking him and sensing the moment had arrived, Morathi made her way up the stairway to the lip of the enormous bowl, then disappeared into the mist of boiling Varanite. The ritual was in excruciating pain to Morathi, but she maintained her composure. She started to eat the souls of long dead elven gods and kings of the world that was. She devoured them all until she reached one last that gave her a moment of weakness. It was the soul of somebody she once loved, probably an Aryan, but this soul hated Morathi, and the soul pierced Morathi as she was distracted by the sudden emotions of seeing this old elven soul once again. And the ritual ended. Aside from the fact that she got pierced by this soul, back into the real world, High King Volturnas stormed into the chamber where the ritual was being held and destroyed the mother cauldron, and when this happened, outside the chamber, the Slaanesh forces witnessed the explosion, and out of the explosion came a screaming figure that flew across the sky. Witnessing this, the Slaanesh forces retreated and followed the figure, leaving the Canaanite and the Scourged privateers alone to battle the Idaneth Deepkin. Back in the chambers, out of the explosions came two figures. It was Morathi, and the two figures were one. Morathi, who had almost completed the ritual, her soul was split in two. One would be the monster soul and the other would be her human soul, or her elven soul, but they would act as one, her new name being the goddess Morathi Kane. After their revelation, High King Voltros still wanted his lantern back, but Morathi showed it was destroyed. But not all was lost. She wanted to make peace and forge an alliance with the Idaneth to go against Teclis and Tyrion. And in doing so, in the middle of the ritual, using the lantern, she also called the spirits of the slain Sethe and brought them with her and gave them to King Voltros as a peace offering. And so was the beginning of the Idaneth and Kane alliance. Lord Van Wyck was now reforged and sent word to Sigmar about the shrines built by the Eater of Tomes, and was now dispatched to Avangard, where the cruelty of Morathi Kane's betrayal would be felt once more. It was time for her to commence her expansion, and Avangard was the first to fall. Lord Van Wyck was already suspecting Morathi, for he knew she was duplicitous. but he had no proof, and the high-ranking members of the city were disappearing, but he did not know who was involved, and soon he would find out. A sudden mist flowed into the city, and now the attack had begun. The elves of the city began to attack their human allies. The Free Guild and the Dwarden were now falling, and the city was in chaos. The few held in Hammer did not know what was going on or who was the enemy. Many suspected Morathi, but they did not want to blame an ally of Sigmar, so they tried to send word through the gates as to the events taking place, and soon they began to fight for the survival and also maintain order in the city. The Dark Elf, or the Scorched Privateers as they're known, soon were taking over the city, but not all want to play a part in this madness. Some of the Scorched Privateers helped defend the city and say they do not trust the betrayal of Morathi. Van Bright decided it was time to retreat to the Black Nexus if they had any chance to survive. After a grueling battle, they reached it, and Morathi gives command that no Stormcast should be killed in order to avoid any of them zapping back to his ear and telling Sigmar about the sudden betrayal. In their last stand, they were able to hold until their hope was crushed when the newly born goddess Morathi Gain joined the battle. So Avangard fell, and Van Bright was captured and imprisoned, and Sigmar not knowing what he had lost. Be'lakor sent one of his creatures to free Van Bright so he can warn Sigmar, and the creature succeeds and Van Bright escapes the city of Avangard, and so Be'lakor's background plans are being successfully launched. The Idoneth and Canaanite warriors begin to attack cities all around Akshi, and Sigmar is beginning to notice the sudden betrayal of Morathi. Meanwhile, back in Haish, Nagash has decided it was time for him to take matters in his own hand and decided to attack Haish himself. He led the attack to Metrica, where he made his way to Mount Avalanor, the highest point in Metrica. That is where he decided he will take control over the region itself. But he faced stiff resistance from the Lumineth, and soon the Mage God himself joined the battle, and now it was a clash of gods. The clash of old enemies. Nagash, who in the world that was, learned the knowledge of magic and necromancy, and created his nine books from the Dark Elves' dark magic, mixed with his knowledge of Nehekaran magic. And Teclis, who even in the world that was, thought he could save it, but failed. And he wishes to protect this world from happening again. The battle rages, and soon Teclis manages to summon the strength to transport them into the void, and there they kept fighting, letting their full might loose. Teclis in one sweep of light magic destroys the 9 books of Nagash, which infuriates Nagash. The consequences of such actions to be decided in future, because we don't know if he has actually memorized all these spells. But this makes him mad, and the rage of Nagash rises and manages to land a critical blow to Teclis, who is bleeding, but this does not deteriorate Teclis' resolve into defeating Nagash. The clash ends Teclis' spell and now transports themselves back into Mount Avalanor. Back in the ground, the battle rages on between humans of Settlers Gain and Lumineth against the Yosaric and Flesh Eater Courts. Seeing the god mage Teclis losing, they decided to help as much as they can, and so the Light Engines Luminarch send their powerful concentrated magic towards Nagash, and this holds off Nagash enough for Teclis to begin to use the combined magic of all the Ether Courts to bind Nagash and destroy his physical body, and create a huge rune in the sky of Haish and end the effects of the Necroquake for good. And so the events of Soul Wars are no more. After this battle is over, Teclis and Ilario proceed to have another conversation about what is going to happen next, and because of the defeat of Nagash and the end of death spreading over the realms, it was now time for the cycle of life to begin. But they don't know what that will entail, but they say that they will face it together. And so guys, this is where I'm gonna end this video. It was a little bit shorter, but I decided not to make another 30-minute long video. But hopefully you're liking this series. I will make a part 3 in the end. It will just be focusing on what happens in Be'lakor, because as it is, there's no more tight connections to the other 2 books. The rest is just from Be'lakor, and hopefully we'll see what Kragnos adds to the story. But hopefully you're liking the video, and remember, not everything is what it seems in the realm of Ulgus.